Sorry, my recording didn't start. Now it is. We want to welcome Norm and Carol Waggy, who are the interim directors of Global Mission, and I will turn this over to them and let them lead us through some time together this evening. Welcome, Norm and Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to be with you all.
It is good. We appreciate your taking the time to hear this, and we hope this can be useful to all of you.
As Russ said, we are interim. We began this position back in March, about 2 weeks before the entire country closed down with COVID. So when we took the job, we thought we would be doing a lot of international travel and a lot of travel like perhaps to your district conference sort of thing. And we have been home in Goshen, Indiana for ever since the middle of March, doing all of the work that we can, connecting with our churches and partners around the world through Zoom and emails and a few phone calls.
WhatsApp, et cetera, et cetera. So basically we spend about 3 hours a day on email work and then trying to keep connections. This is about the time Judy was just coming back from Nigeria that we started here. So we are interim. This position, which is the Director of Global Ministries for the Global Mission for the Church of the Brethren, has been advertised, and I believe they're still taking applications. We know that
they did 2 interviews last week, so we're hoping that something works out soon with one of those interviews, or if someone you know should be applying very quickly, get them to make contact with David Steele very quickly. We're hoping that maybe by the end of the year, a new person will have this position.
So our goal tonight is to share a little bit about the 11 Church of the Brethren denominations around the world, tell you just a tiny bit about some of the other work that's going on through the U.S. Church of the Brethren around the world, and then to show you an 8-minute video that Marcus Inhauser made. Many of you know. Okay. All right. Many of you know Marcus, and we'll tell about that. If you recall, back in 1978 at annual conference, we adopted a paper that said that we would be working in new ways with international missions than we had perhaps in the past.
When was this?
I'm sorry, 2018. Did I say 1978?
Yeah, you said 19
Thank
something.
You.
I don't
2018, 2 years ago. 2 years ago. If you think back to the 1960s and 70s, time when we had many, many, many workers at various countries around the world, especially Nigeria, our model was to send missionaries from the United States to other countries and build schools and teach and run hospitals and so on. What we're working towards and working at is being brother and sister denominations with groups around the world that are Church of the Brethren. And that means then we're no longer the ones who make the decisions for other denominations. We do it as a global Church of the Brethren communion. And so that is what we're trying to work towards. There was a meeting in Nigeria last December of 2019, bringing together as many of the representatives from these groups as possible. The problem was some people couldn't get their visas. One person here sitting beside me was to go, and Carol couldn't get her visa. It was denied by the government there in Nigeria.
No. It was eventually approved, but it wasn't sent in time for me to go.
So there are some logistical issues with that. We were hoping that perhaps we could have another meeting in 2020, and of course the pandemic has stopped that. So we're trying to do some Zoom meetings with representatives from around the world, and another one is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Actually, our first Zoom attempt to bring representatives from all these 11 different countries. So it'll be an interesting session tomorrow morning. We'll
So if you
see
would
how it
please
works. Be
keep
in
all
prayer
the
for us.
leaders of the Church of the Brethren denominations from around the world in your prayers tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock your Pacific time, 8 o'clock in Arizona.
So we're going to share with you a map that we put together this summer. No, that one.
Is that coming through, Russ?
Okay.
Yes, you're good.
We did this to show the various places around the world where there are registered Church of the Brethren denominations. What we did was contact each of these, the leaders of each of these churches, and ask them to respond to a few simple questions, giving us a little bit of their statistics, how many churches, how many members, and then share some joys and concerns. We intended, when we asked those questions, to include all of that information on this map. And it turned out that some of them sent back 4 or 5 pages of information, and some of them sent back 1 paragraph or less. So we ended up with a slightly different map here than we expected, but we wanted to just go through these quickly. I don't know if you can read what's there. That might not be large enough for you.
And if you can't read this, you can get it on the www.brethren.org website also. So we'll just say in the United States, there are now about 960 congregations, fellowships. We have over 90,000 members. And we, of course, appreciate prayers about the political and cultural divisiveness and the pandemic issues, etc.
Haiti has 21 congregations and an additional 8 preaching points with 3,000 believers there. Many of you have probably heard of the Haiti Medical Project. That is one of the major things going on for Global Mission in Haiti.
In Venezuela, there are 2,100 believers in 21 congregations. They're reaching out into some ethnic areas, what they call ethnic areas. It would be more tribal areas
along the Orinoco River.
Right, in the interior of the country. They are trying to provide food and address emergency needs with the pandemic.
And this would be one of the countries where the Emergency Disaster Fund has sent a good bit of help in doing some of that food distribution. Brazil does not have a large grouping. They meet in several different places for worship and Bible study in small groups. Their ministries include a newspaper column that Marcos Inhauser writes and a website. Sueli does family therapy with at least 25 families during this pandemic over the internet. And trying to remember his name, Alexandre Goncalves, works with training on family violence.
We'll speed it up here, but we'd love to hear questions from you. We don't
Later.
want this.
So
right.
we want to spend most of our time there.
So Spain, 7 congregations, about 325 members. They have very active ministries and they're reaching out to some of the local communities.
The Dominican Republic, which is the other half of that island of Hispaniola that shares with Haiti, have 19 congregations and nearly 1,000 members. They are currently going through a bit of a struggle. The Haitian community within the Dominican Republic Church has separated themselves off, and at this point we are trying to relate to both groups with the hope of eventually bringing them back together as one denomination. That'll be a major effort for the new director of Global Mission. We're doing what we can in the meantime, and we have a Zoom meeting scheduled with each of the groups within the next week.
Many of you have been in Nigeria. You've certainly heard a lot about Nigeria. Nigeria is now the largest of all the Church of the Brethren denominations around the world. 1,600 places of worship, over 500,000 members. You certainly have heard about the Boko Haram difficulties, hunger, COVID-19. Let's lift up an exciting ministry there. The Comway Bible translation has just been completed, and they need some funds in order to print the Bibles. So this is one of the tribes. For those of you who lived in Nigeria previously, they called them Higgy, but that's a sort of a pejorative term, so it's Comway. And so it's exciting to have their Bible in their language.
The Church of the Brethren in the Democratic Republic of Congo has 10 congregations and over 3,000 members.
They've had a lot of
They've,
flooding
right.
recently, and fortunately no lives lost.
So they've received a number of emergency disaster fund grants as well.
Moving across to Rwanda, 4 congregations, 400 members. One thing that we just learned today is that their government is threatening to close houses of worship if they don't have running water. They have hand washing stations, and they have places where they can put bottles of water for washing hands. But the new edict apparently is they have to have
It's
running
been for a
water.
while.
So they're going to need about $3,500 in help. We think we're
That was 35,000.
oh, actually, we don't know. We're still learning. So
Yeah, that's an ongoing
in Rwanda,
developing project. In Uganda, they have 191 members in 6 congregations, and they officially registered within Uganda as a Church of the Brethren, and then we learned about it.
which was an interesting way to find a new Church of the Brethren denomination. We can tell you more about that if you'd like to hear about it. That was
Yeah.
exciting.
But
They run an orphanage. They really, truly are working at servanthood, pacifism, and teaching Brethren theology.
go ahead.
In India, as you know, there have been 2 groups that are Church of the Brethren there. There's
Wouldn't call them the Church of
there's a
Brethren.
Church of the Brethren and the Church of North India. And
And we try to relate to both groups.
so it's exciting to see all this happening around the world. We should also tell you that about twice a week, we get letters from people around the world writing and saying, we've seen your website, we hear about your theology, could we partner with you? So it's of course, we can't respond positively to all of those, but it's interesting to get those. So now I'm going to try to switch to a different screen. Is this coming through? Thank you. This is also showing those 11 countries with the Church of the Brethren denominations. But
After doing those 11 country map, we realized there are quite a few other places that we should, and the people will want to know about beyond the ones where we have the denominations registered. For example, we'll go through just the ones that are the teal color.
well, okay, so in Mexico, there's a relationship with several congregations who are working at registering as Church of the Brethren with the Mexican government. And Gilbert Romero of Bittersweet Ministries, whom you know well, and Carol Waggy are relating with them.
In Honduras, there's been a relationship with Chet Thomas and his NGO, PAG, for quite a few years. But more recently, we're developing a relationship with a small congregation there in one of the suburbs of Tegucigalpa. That's an exciting congregation, and the pastors there are wanting to begin some theological education through the academy, the Brethren Academy, the Spanish version of that called SEBA.
In Ecuador, as you know, there was U.S. Church of the Brethren mission work 50, 60 years ago or more. There's still a program there that's not run by Church of the Brethren, but it's run by a group that we're trying to support and help.
If we jump across to, oh, you're going to South Sudan. Okay, South Sudan. This is one of the places where we do have a Church of the Brethren mission worker. Athanasius Ngong is an American pastor who is from South Sudan originally, and he is there working at the Peace Center in Torit and working at several church plants. He recently had been home for his daughter's wedding, had some health issues when he returned, but he is now back in South Sudan. And probably Don could tell you a lot more about that than we could.
So we're hoping this isn't all one-sided here. We'll try to finish quickly. In Burundi, Church of the Brethren has been supporting the work of some trauma healing and reconciliation. And we'll jump.
And you'll notice before he jumps there that India, we have two colors. That's because there is a relationship with the Church of North India, which the Church of the Brethren joined together with some other groups to form a number of years ago. But there's been this smaller group of Church of the Brethren folks who were dissatisfied with that after a number of years and have been asking for relationship again with the Church of the Brethren. So as of an annual conference decision a number of years ago, we now relate to both of those.
China, mission workers Eric Miller and Rusha Lee are developing a hospice program there. In Vietnam, Church of the Brethren continues to support the work for the blind. It was begun by Grace Mishler. She's back, but we're still providing some support.
Yeah, that relationship is mostly funding with the funds that Grace is still raising.
The Global Food Initiative, which is part of Global Missions, is over the past year has responded to requests from 27 partner organizations in 10 countries plus the US.
We also have Church of the Brethren presence through Brethren Volunteer Service in several places around the world, most recently in Northern Ireland, El Salvador, and I think a new one is just going to Japan.
So now we've thrown a lot at you. We've talked very quickly. Noemi, we apologize
Yes, we
for
talked
making
faster
you
than we meant to.
translate quickly. I think the next thing we should do is show this video and then make sure we give you all the rest of the time for questions and feedback.
So explain a little more
responses.
now what the video is.
Okay, so in Brazil, many of you know Marcos Inhauser and his wife Sue Lee, who have been workers with the US Church for 30 some years. Marcos is fun to work with. He is always thinking so well theologically. And he built a YouTube video
for
to explain Pietist and Anabaptist
roots of the Church of the Brethren.
Right. And then he had us help along with some others to get it translated into Spanish. And this is what we'd like to show you. So let's see if I can come up with this.
And we may have to go back, get it back to the beginning once you get it there.
Right.
Click on that.
We'll
Bring it back to the beginning.
bring it back to beginning.
Here we go.
Here we go.
That's blocked. What is on ours? I don't know what is on ours.
I'm going to stop it for a little bit, Russ. Can you read the English across the top?
Or is it blocked by the?
Is it blocked by
I
the
was
volume?
able to read the English.
Okay, and is the
Okay.
volume correct?
You could be a little louder on your end.
Okay, thank you.
6 minutes or something. No, don't, no, just. Okay. Let's go back to the full screen.
Are we coming through okay?
Back in your living room.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we just appreciated Marcus offering that. He put that together and said, well, this is what he would like to share with others around the world who are thinking of the Church of the Brethren.
So we have posted that on the website under Global Mission. So if you want to use it, share it in any way, you can find it there.
So what questions or feedback or wisdom do you have for us? We're all ears.
I'd like to ask a question, getting back to your map of the two different kinds of affiliations. First, we have the affiliation of churches that see themselves as churches of the brethren. Now, although I've been a member for many years, I really don't know very much about the mission field. And so I'm curious, where did they all come from mission work? Is that where they all came from? And I noticed that both Marcus and you mentioned places where they once were and aren't anymore, like, for instance, Denmark.
Right.
Could you talk about that? I mean, particularly like a place like Spain. How does it get to Spain?
Excellent question. And we would love to take a lot of time to tell you about each one, but let's name two that are on opposite ends of the spectrum. India, the Church of the Brethren US, sent missionaries over there 105 years ago, and they lived there and built churches and schools and hospitals, and that eventually grew into a Church of the Brethren.
So there was that kind of mission work in Nigeria and Ecuador and China. Those were, I think, the three main ones.
Yeah.
And India.
Right.
Did you say that?
Now let's take one at the other end of the spectrum. We got an email, February, it came in just before we started in March, and it was from a US Church of the Brethren pastor whose son had studied in Uganda, and he went with his son to visit some of his son's friends in Uganda. When he landed there, someone had heard about him and had seen the US Church of the Brethren website and sent him a message and said, I would like to meet with you because we believe we are Church of the Brethren in our theology. This person's name, the US pastor's name,
Gordon
Hoffert. And Gordon said, well, okay, I'll meet with you. The Ugandan man got back on the public bus with his wife and tiny child, and they traveled 12 hours to get to the capital city, met with Gordon. Gordon said, wow, what you are telling us sounds like this is what we are believing. They kept
in contact and made another trip over.
And by February of this year, Gordon had been out to visit with them. This group of people had grown to several more congregations. They registered with the government as Church of the Brethren. They are a pacifist group that emphasize servanthood. Anabaptist theology and pietist theology. It's just absolutely incredible.
So according to our structure paper, global church structure paper passed 2 years ago, we felt like they are Church of the Brethren.
Who are we to say that they are not?
Yeah.
Now, once there is a global Church of the Brethren communion and everyone is meeting together,
Which is what we're trying to develop.
then we could take it to that group and say, group, here is someone in Uganda who's leading a group of congregations. Do you believe that they are part of this group? And let's welcome them.
And that group can set up some criteria for evaluating whether this new group should be part of the global communion or not.
One more exciting part about that I find exciting is that Ugandan church asked for a pastor's manual, and the EYN church in Nigeria sent their pastor's manual. Yes, the EYN church sent it, and it was
Congo.
translated into Kiswahili for the use of people in the DR Congo and Uganda. That I get excited about that kind of thing. So anyway, there's that whole spectrum.
To add to that, you asked about the church in Spain in particular. That denomination grew out of mission work from some people from the Dominican Republic who were part of the Church of the Brethren in the Dominican Republic, who went to Spain to work and started a church there.
So
I was wondering what's happening with the kind of formalizing a relationship with the Africa Inland Church in South Sudan. Has anything changed about that?
nothing has changed. So for those of you who know what's happening, this will be a repeat. For those who aren't familiar with it, the Africa Inland Church is a group that the Church of the Brethren US has been working with. Roger and Carolyn Schrock were there. Phil and Louis Raymond were there. We do have Athanasius Ungang, who Carol mentioned, who is a staff person that's living there and working in the Turit Peace Center. They had two groups that were going to be incorporating as a congregation of the Church of the Brethren, but they've now had flooding and the pandemic has closed everything down. So we're thinking that still may happen.
Okay, thanks.
The first question came from Al Clark, and that last one I think was from Karen Shankster. And I'd invite you, if you, it's been good bringing the questions in, but if you can take a moment and introduce yourself. I see Chuck and Norma Lovelace have raised their hand, so I'll call on them next if they'd like to ask a question.
Isn't that nice? I've been doing a lot of Zoom. I know how to raise my hand.
Sorry about that. I didn't.
That's quite all right. We are from the Central Valley of California. I was raised in the Fresno Church of the Brethren. Chuck was raised in Bakersfield Church of the Brethren. We went to the University of Laverne. So my question for you is, I know numbers are sometimes not the most important thing, but I'm just curious about when you look at the Church of the Brethren, say when I was in high school several years ago, and you look at it now, do you see it globally being growing, or has it shrunk, or where are we at in the numbers? And even in the United States, I think we've shrunk, if I understand correctly. But I was just curious about it on the global scene. That's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly it has decreased in the US. For a time, though, the Church of the Brethren in Nigeria had more members than the US church.
Well, they still do.
Well, yeah, but Boko Haram has really decimated that church. Many of the buildings have been destroyed and the people have scattered. So I'm not sure, it's hard to know what the numbers are at this point.
But their numbers are somewhere around 500,000, which would be more than 5 times what the US church is. And when we were there in 96, And this was, there are others of you who have been there more recently. Judy, you were there just recently, and others of you have. I was impressed by the EYN leaders saying, if you stomp on a fire, you scatter the embers, and then you have bigger fires. And so they were using this as an example to say,
I'm not sure that's a great example for all you California folks right now. I'm sorry.
yeah, okay, sorry about that.
But that was an illustration that we found inspiring in a lot of ways, that they were seeing all of the damage done by Boko Haram as something that had spread the church, and
Into
there
Cameroon
were some good
and
things.
yeah,
happening.
into other parts of Nigeria and into neighboring countries.
I think Phil had a question.
Thank you. This has all been fascinating. I'm Pastor Phil Core at Church of the Brethren in McFarland, just north of Bakersfield. Got many questions. I'm going to try to limit to an observation and a question if possible. I've had a passion for missions since my high school years. And by the time of seminary, right after college, I developed a similar passion for church history, was able to combine the two in a dissertation. I'm intrigued by the India situation. You may know that the Apostle Thomas is believed to have started the church in southern India. And in northern India, at least the northernmost part there, my understanding is in recent decades, that has been an area of frontier missions with pretty intense Islamic and Hindu opposition up there. And tied in with my question is noticing that the United States is not alone with having some tensions between different groups within brethren. I'll just leave it at that for this discussion. What is the reason, or are the reasons for the group that broke off and is wanting to be recognized as well?
There's a marvelous book written by Chantalal Bhagat back in, I believe, 2000 that spends 160 pages answering that question.
Okay,
I'm going to try to do it here.
Do you know the title of it, or is it in English? Or
it is in English.
It is in
I guess so.
You could get it through Brethren Press.
Okay, I could check with Russ later because I have
Right.
trouble with that name.
But here's how I would describe it. The Church of the Brethren in the United States sent missionaries over 105 years ago to India. And what developed was a number of congregations and hospitals and schools and a lot of work. And over a period of 30 to 40 years, that group of Church of the Brethren members in India was talking with 5 other groups of Christians, and they eventually formed a brand new church called the Church of North India, CNI. And the Church of North India was to be the new church containing all 6 groups. And they signed with the U.S. Church's blessing, annual conference. We all said, this is marvelous. They said, this is marvelous. And this was about 1976, I believe, give or take several years. Within about, and they signed all the papers saying that all of this property went over to the Church of North India. Within 4 or 5 years, a group of people who had grown up within the Indian Church of the Brethren and who had joined the Church of North India said, this is not what we understood.
We're not getting what we thought we signed up for.
They were disagreeing with the theology, with the bishops, with some of the hierarchical things. And they said, we don't believe that this is really who we are. And they also brought out papers showing that perhaps the papers that had been signed to move all that information, all that property to the Church of North India were done incorrectly. Unfortunately, that meant over the next 30 to 40 years, this was tied up in the courts, and the Church of North India and this breakaway group who said, we are the true Church of the Brethren. We're from the 2nd District. So they're known as the 2nd District Church of the Brethren. We're in court, unfortunately. But every time the group that called themselves the 2nd District actually won their court cases, the paperwork apparently was not done quite correctly. So that meant then that some of those properties went back to this group. So the US church was faced with saying, do we only relate with the Church of North India? Do we relate only with the group that broke away and said, we are the true Church of the Brethren, or do we relate with both? And there were hurt feelings, and many of you remember all of this from annual conferences. As recently as 10 years ago, the US church was saying, we will relate with both groups. Now, I've given a nutshell there that I hope is not misleading or damaging. I think our brothers in India, brothers and sisters, would say, yes, that's an appropriate nutshell.
No, that's wonderful, and I won't take up any more time, and I don't want to give too much away or make people feel, or make Russ feel like he's going to have to start doing this for everybody. But he has mentioned next time we get together for a meal, which we're now able to do in Kern County, that among other things we could discuss.
Do us a favor, please. Write to us. Our email address is NC, that's like Norm Carol, ncwaggy @brethren.org. And just say, hey, Carol and Norm, what was the name of that book on India?
Okay, I've written it down. Thank you.
And that's true for anyone else. All of you,
Yeah.
please feel free to write to us and just say, hey, I've got a question.
Are there other questions?
Judy?
I was just gonna say that, you know, the vast majority of the traditional missionaries in Nigeria left in what, the 70s maybe? Is that
Late
about
60s.
when it happened?
Late 60s, early 70s.
So then the church, became the EYN. So the church was then run, decisions were then made by local people and no longer foreigners. And I think that theologically, the EYN has put its own stamp on things. You know, it's a little bit different than, say, the film that we just viewed kind of summed things up in a nutshell. But just one small example is the Apostolic Creed, which I don't think any American Church of the Brethren say that, but it was definitely part of the services in the EYN.
Yes.
And I would love to have about 6 hours to hear Don Shankster tell us about all of that, because Don grew up there.
Went to the Hillcrest and went to church there.
Don's
So
parents.
the Joss congregation had an English, what they called their English service at 8, and the Hausa service at 10. But the problem was, you know, they were never done on time. And then at least once a month, if not more frequently, they combined the services. And when they had baby dedications, it was like 12 babies and, you know, 6 choirs, and wow. You know, so my thing there was just trying to stay awake, or, you know.
Judy, we spent most of our time in those services trying to figure out which person was speaking Hausa and which Bora, so we could know which one we were supposed to be trying to figure out.
Oh my gosh. Well, and then some people speak the English with such a heavy accent, you don't realize it's English.
Are there other questions for Norm and Carol this evening? Comments?
Yeah, as long as we're on the topic of Nigeria, how is that church organized? Do they have an annual conference? Do they have a secretariat and that kind of stuff? Because they're so large. I'm sure the other churches aren't quite, in the different countries, aren't quite as organized.
Right.
Very true.
Church of the EYN, Ecclesia Yanoa Nigeria, which is a literal translation, Church of the Children of the Same Mother in Nigeria. Did I get that right, Don?
Pretty close, yeah.
Has a Majalisa, which is their annual conference. They have districts. They have officers in a headquarters. And what else? They
I'll
have.
add one thing. They
Mhm.
have an annual choir convention.
Uh-huh.
And that is absolutely amazing when all those choirs get together. And while I was there, they had it in Maiduguri, which is in the extreme northeast. It's a city heavily under siege by the Boko Haram, but they had their meeting there anyway. And one white woman from America came and participated. Pam, I think it's Gerberich. She's from Eastern Pennsylvania. And they offered to host 4 people, and she's the only one who took them up on it. And after she attended, she came to visit me in Jos, and I heard all the details, but what an amazing event. Their choirs are amazing.
Yeah. They also have a very active women's fellowship.
And there's not only women's fellowship, there's sisters fellowship. And it took me months to figure out the difference. At first I thought, oh, it's the single women, it's the married women, but it wasn't that at all. The sisters fellowship is for those who want to do stuff in English. And so Sharon Flatten, the Bethany student who was the housemaid, she joined the sisters fellowship, but actually most of the time they spoke Hausa. So I think they tried to sing in English.
Well, I think it is important for us to remember that each group needs to make their understandings of their Anabaptist and Pietist theology fit into their cultural setting. So what we deal with in the United States is not necessarily what the Nigerians will deal with, and not necessarily what the Venezuelans will deal with, or the Spaniards.
No, as an example, we received a message last week, I think, from a person in Nigeria asking for counsel because he had some man come to him and ask if I, as a Christian, have married, become a Christian after I have taken more than one wife. What am I supposed to do when I become a Christian with these 2 wives? And that's not a question that we deal with here in the US.
Although our Nigerian brothers and sisters, when we were there, would point out to us that in the United States culture, we do have polygamy. We just have serial polygamy, one after the other.
What surprised me in Nigeria was that I assumed polygamy was more common among Muslims, but apparently it's also common still among Christians.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've got
It's
just a
big
couple
part
more.
of the culture.
We've got just a couple more minutes. If there's any other questions or if there's any final comments that Norm and Carol want to make.
I'm wondering if I could ask one more question about Nigeria. When we decided at the district conference to ask you to come and talk, it was because I saw a film that I guess you had made, and part of it showed a service in Nigeria, and it appeared in that service, which there were lots of people there, but it appeared that the men and women were separated. Is that true in the Nigerian church?
In most of them, yes.
Can I answer for the churches I attended?
Sure, Judy.
So in Jos, the big church, it was informal. So like a lot of the women tended to sit on the left half and the men on the right, but they really didn't care. And I was always sitting in the wrong place. They just thought, oh, there's that crazy foreign lady there. she does what she wants. But it seemed to be very mixed. So I think people, if they felt they needed to be among just one gender, they would kind of sit in that certain place. I think it's fairly relaxed.
Although it would be more traditional out in the villages. You were in the big city.
True.
In the big city, it would be more relaxed. So Alfred, the answer I think would be that people do tend to sit men on one side, women on the other.
They were always very forgiving of us sitting together, however.
What about the children? And I mean, what about family groups?
In general, the children would sit with the mother until they're older and then sit with the father.
Or the girls would stay.
The girls would stay with the mother. Yes. Yeah. I think we number one, we just want to say thank you so much for the chance to share with you. We are excited about what we've been able to see and experience in this job. And I hope we've been able to share a little bit of that with you.
And we are certainly open to ongoing questions and comments if you want to email those to us. We'd be happy to receive them.
Yeah, ncwaggy@brethren.org. And if you want, we can even, you can email us and we'll call you. But we do need to be sensitive to the time, Russ. So we'll shut up here unless there's time for another question.
Maybe we can get one more quick question in.
Karen?
I was interested in you have the relationship in Ecuador with the foundation that's still there, the work there. Okay. But no longer a church presence happening.
Correct. The
Okay.
Church of the Brethren that developed there from the mission workers eventually joined with some other groups. It was sort of like
Similar to what happened in India.
with the exception that they stayed together with the other groups.
When I was there in the late 70s, it was the Brethren and United Foundation, several denominations doing the service work versus the church development work. So I was just curious.
That organization is currently struggling mightily because of the COVID having cut their income. So if you're looking for another possibility of a place that needs some help, that would be one.
It's because they run a conference center and they had university students and other groups coming in. And when COVID shut everything down, they still had all their expenses to run the center, but they didn't have any income.
We trained health workers at that center. And so I was just curious, kind of, it sounds like that's still continuing, but this would be a rough time. Yeah,
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you so much.
I want to step in and extend our thanks from the Pacific Southwest District for you taking time this evening to join us, and to all of you who've joined us. There are 28 folks who have joined in tonight, and it's been good to be together. Certainly, we want to hear the invitation from Norm and Carol to share, to hold in prayer tomorrow morning the gathering on Zoom of leaders of all of those 11 bodies that they walked us through this evening and gave us a little glimpse of. And it's almost too bad we're not having this meeting tomorrow night. You would have been fresh with a report from that gathering.
Yes.
But
That's right.
instead, we are blessed to get to hold that in prayer. So as we close, would you all join me in a spirit of prayer as we close this time? Gracious God, we thank you for the sharing this evening. We thank you for your spirit pouring out in people around the globe and them catching a vision that has been meaningful to so many of us and making it work and making it fit and sharing the good news of Jesus in their culture and in their homes and in their countries. Continue to bless the work that they do. And we pray, oh God, that the meeting tomorrow would experience the full power of your Spirit as in Pentecost, as they gather and talk and connect, as they look forward to times to be together physically that are not possible now, but knowing that they are gathered in spirit, in your Spirit, in this time. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our Lord, Savior, teacher, and friend. Amen.
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 Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And we will see some of you in other insight sessions in about 30 minutes. So blessings all.
Thank you, Russ. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
very much.
Bye.